The cliffs of Tojinbo on the coast of the Sea of Japan. It's famous for its rugged beauty, but Tojinbo also has a dark side. Many Japanese people come here to end their lives by throwing themselves onto the jagged rocks and crashing waves. The suicide rate in Japan is one of the highest in the world. More than 30,000 people take their own lives every year. I'm Tanto Jinbo. On this edition of 101 East, we ask why so many Japanese, young and old, see suicide as the only option.
Two people from Osaka were here about 10 days ago. An 80-year-old mother and her 60-year-old son. It must have been exhaustion from looking after an elderly member in the family. They jumped off that cliff. The mother died, her son landed in the water and survived. I was patrolling when I heard tourists shouting. I went over and looked down. The son was holding her limp, broken body, screaming. It was an image of life and death overlapping. He screamed like a madman. I've never heard anything so painful. The Coast Guard and ambulance arrived and took them away. I can't even describe how I felt. I just wish they had looked me up in my office nearby. It's such a pity.
In Fukui Prefecture, 300 kilometers west of Tokyo, Yukio Shige sees himself as the gatekeeper of Tojinbo. Since retiring as a policeman 6 years ago, his personal mission has been to stop people who come here to kill themselves. Official records state more than 600 people made the fatal leap in the past 30 years, turning the area into a source of fascination for sightseers. Stationed here before retirement, Shige had to fish out a number of dead bodies from the sea himself. Now 65 years old, he patrols the cliffs daily with a group of volunteers he has assembled. He says they have saved nearly 300 people from jumping. This year alone, more than 60. Their efforts may have lowered the death toll, but on average, 1 or 2 suicidal people still slip through the cracks every month.
Around here, people wait for sunset. They might sit here and drink some alcohol while waiting. That's west. When the sun sets, they jump. They wait here for the right time. This is one of the points they might jump from. It's immediate death because there's a bed of rocks down there. You can tell when someone is just sitting there and deep in thought. They're waiting for someone to talk to. They're waiting for help. That's why when we see such people, we'll chat with them, ask them why they are here. When I remind them it's dangerous, their faces turn red. They start crying. I console them and say, it must have been hard on you. Even a grown man will just break into tears. Eventually, they might share their problems, and I invite them to my office for a chat.
And that was how this 35-year-old man was saved. He requested that we conceal his identity and only wants to be known as Tetsuya Yoruda. His Tojinbo trip in September was meant to be his final journey. Reluctant to be a tourist spectacle, he says, he was waiting for the sun to set before jumping. But one of Yukio Shige's volunteers spotted him and stopped him in time.
I came here to commit suicide because even though I'm a college graduate, I don't have a job. At the time when I graduated, it was known as the ice age of the job market. I had to take up part-time jobs. But I lost those jobs too. There seemed to be no place for me to live, and I thought I should just end my life.
How did you think your death would affect your loved ones, your family, for example?
I'm not close to my family, and I have no friends. I wasn't thinking about them.
What message do you have for people in Japan who might be in the situation that you were in, feeling suicidal?
People may feel suicidal for many reasons, but they shouldn't just act on it. If there's someone you can rely on or talk to, go to the person. For me, it was Shige-san and the people who work with him. They got me back on my feet. You shouldn't hurry to die. There are people who want to live but can't. You should think about them if you want to take your own life.
9時46分に
Today at 9:46 a.m., a man in Tokyo called me on my mobile phone. He said his friend is in a bad situation and has come to Tojinbo, so please look out for her.
巡回してこの人や。あ、もしもし。はいはい。あ、東尋坊の重ですが、どちらさん？あ、東京の方ね。今巡回しているんやけども、今それ出しき方はちょっと見当たらんもんでね。
As he searches for the woman, Yukio Shige tells us 3 other volunteers are already scouring the cliffs. But the sunny day has attracted many sightseers from across Japan. The former policeman has to carefully scan the crowd.
観光客と違いというと、やっぱ顔が一番。
The biggest difference between tourists and suicidal people is their facial expression. They won't be smiling.
ほとんど荷物持っていません。
I also look at what they carry.
もちろんカメラも持っていない。
Suicidal people won't have cameras or souvenirs. Tourists tend to wear brighter colors.
観光に来られた人はどちらかというと明るい感じ。
Suicidal people wear darker tones.
暗い感じの服装できますね。
The woman was nowhere to be found along the 1.5 kilometer stretch of cliffs. But while looking for her, this couple attracted Shige's attention.
ねえ、これ1時間半ほど一緒の場所でさ。
That couple has been sitting at the same spot and talking for more than 1.5 hours. It's a dangerous spot. Take one step forward and you could fall. Sometimes when a conversation gets intense, a suicidal person might do just that. I sensed danger, so I went to eavesdrop. I went up close and peered at them. Usually if someone is listening to your private conversation, you would move away. But they didn't. I think they're okay. They might be trouble, but they don't seem suicidal.
Yukio Shige feels the death toll at the cliffs hasn't been helped by the way local authorities promote tourism at Tojinbo.
In Japan, there are many places of interest. Local officials say we need to be unique in order to be competitive. They sell Tojinbo as one of the favorite spots for suicidal people, so as to draw more visitors. I am totally against this.
2006 saw the dawn of change in Japan for activists like Yukio Shige. They successfully pressured the government to pass the basic suicide prevention law, which treats suicide as a social problem rather than a private matter. Authorities called for more research on suicide prevention and urged employers, schools, and government agencies to identify and help people at risk.
簡単に言うと一つは精神の分野、精神衛生。
To put it simply,
One of the things we have to address is mental health. From our data, 50% of suicides in Japan involves depression. So tackling that is important, with the health ministry taking a central role. We need more mental health experts.
But the problem remains, creating a mass grave that draws more than 30,000 people a year to their deaths. The suicide rate hit a high and has remained constant since the 1998 Asian financial crisis that led to big-scale retrenchments in Japan. It changed the nation's traditional cradle-to-grave nature of employment.
At the time, people lost their jobs and it led to many suicides. Nowadays, people can't get good jobs, and that's also causing suicide. So the reasons are changing. We need to carefully examine the nuances and come up with the right measures, or we'll not be able to bring down the numbers.
The government aims to reduce the suicide rate to 23,000 a year by 2016. This year, it engaged suicide prevention group LifeLink for its special task force to battle suicide.
Depression is often said to cause suicide, but it could also be from health problems, financial problems, unemployment. There could be at least 4 main reasons overlapping. It's complex. People in similar occupations or situations tend to commit suicide due to similar reasons and social problems. It could be debts or overworking or exhaustion from taking care of aged parents. There is a pattern to it. So instead of addressing individuals, we need to understand the nature of problems shared by different risk-prone groups and prepare the necessary safety nets.
After the change of government last year, the first thing we did was to create one-stop service centres where you can seek jobs and financial aid. And with the suicide prevention budget, we'll also offer consultation for mental health issues at the centre.
It's not just a social problem. Suicide is also hurting Japan economically. The government estimates last year, suicide victims and depression patients cost the country $32 billion in lost productivity. Yukio Shige prefers a less clinical way to quantify the reasons to live.
To people who come to Tojinbo, I tell them to look at these rocks. They are rough, jagged. But over time, with people walking over them, with the waves of the Sea of Japan crashing on them, they become smoother. That's life. If you can endure hardship, your life will also smoothen out.
After the break, we meet those who returned from the brink of death. And we probe deeper into the culture of suicide in Japan. Stay with 101 East. Chojun Temple in Chiba Prefecture, Japan. As a child, Eiichi Shinohara survived his mother's attempt to kill him before she committed suicide. Today, the Buddhist priest is also a suicide prevention campaigner. Japan's suicide rate has sustained a high for the past 12 years. On average, 90 people kill themselves every day. Since 1992, Reverend Shinohara has counseled more than 6,000 troubled people working around the clock. Sometimes they turn up here and stay for days. Or they call, usually late at night.
超人でございます。もしもし。ゆっくりでいいですよ。先生はどういう診断なんですか？統合失調症。おいくつですか？
A 29-year-old woman is calling Reverend Shinohara. She lives alone, is jobless, and has been on medication for schizophrenia for the past 6 years. In despair, she says she wants to end her life. Eventually, he talks her out of it, perhaps only for now. The woman lives in Fukuoka Prefecture, about 1,000 kilometers away. The Reverend knows there's a limit to what he can do in such cases. So in March last year, he set up a non-profit group with other Buddhist priests. Together, they are forming a network of temples across Japan, offering refuge to suicidal people.
There are more than 80,000 temples in Japan. If we have religious figures who share my ideas, there will be thousands of places for people to go, to seek peace.
Suicide has a long tradition in Japan. The 1962 film Seppuku remains a well-known classic of the samurai genre. Set in the 17th century, it features the ritual of self-disembowelment to defend a warrior's honor. During World War II, Japan became known for its kamikaze pilots who rammed their planes into enemy warships. Today, depression, rather than honor or patriotism, is more likely to cause suicide.
Depression happens when you feel you are a failure, or when there's no hope and you're in a state of helplessness. It also hits those who lose their role in society.
Shizo Fukuyama is a psychology professor. When he was 18, his older sister killed herself, succumbing to personal problems.
There's still an underlying consciousness. People don't feel guilty about committing suicide. Today, even if some say it's not a good thing, they don't reject the idea. In the past, there used to be a practice where poor people leave elderly family members to die in the mountains. Even the elderly may go away themselves so as not to burden the family with another mouth to feed. In Japan, people used to drown themselves in the river or the sea. They felt it was the best way to die. They might not be suffering a hard life. They just believed the next life would be better. That's where the idea of suicide came from.
Today, suicide has become more complex and widespread. Previously seen as a problem that affected mostly the older generation, it has also become the leading cause of death for men and women in their 20s and 30s. Koji Tsukino, who suffered from depression, nearly became one of them.
I didn't know how to interact with people. I was always alone. I couldn't picture my future, so I kept thinking of killing myself. I bought sleeping pills and drugs and ate them by the handful. I slit my wrist many times. I also tried to hang myself, but I didn't know how to do it properly and I fell. The turning point came after I joined an alcoholic treatment group. All the members realized we had similar problems that we couldn't share with other people. We didn't have to compare ourselves with people better than us anymore.
Now 45 years old, Koji Tsukino regularly conducts suicide prevention workshops where he wears the same pajamas he wore whenever he tried to kill himself. As someone who once had an inferiority complex, he hopes Japan can shake off the rigid value judgments that define success and failure.
Japanese people draw a line between losers and winners. For example, if you're permanent staff, you're a winner. If you're not, you're a loser. If you earn $3,500, you're a winner. Below that, you're a loser. You're judged for your looks as well. There are always those two sides. And people want to belong to the better side, or others will look down on them.
There are two sides to every suicide as well: death to the victim and pain for those left behind. Kazuhiro Yamaguchi, has been guilt-ridden since he found his father's body in the family car. Yamaguchi Sr. had mounting debts. He ended his problems by drawing toxic fumes from the exhaust pipe into the car. His son, only 14 at the time, has never stopped wondering what could have been if he had found his father earlier.
Complete recovery can only happen if the dead person returns. I don't think I've been able to fully overcome it. I still have regrets, as I was the first to find him, and that image returns to me.
Now 29, Kazuhiro works in a hospital that specializes in clinical psychiatry. One of his jobs is to conduct gatherings for patients who have lost loved ones to suicide, to share their experiences.
I want people to know that you don't have to suffer alone. There are others out there. That's my message. In Japan, the focus tends to be on suicide prevention. That's important, but there are people suffering because their loved ones are gone. Even if the suicide numbers go down next year, these people won't come back.
In Tokyo, suicide helplines operate through the night. At the Suicide Prevention Center, volunteer counselors receive up to 50 calls a shift. Every year, 200 to 300 callers are already dying by the time they dial in, often from drug overdose or knife injuries.
In reality, more men than women commit suicide. Women seem to find it easier to seek help. In Japan, the problem is especially serious among men in their 50s and 60s. But they find it hard to ask for help. They stop themselves. We want to help them, but we can't. These men just don't pick up the phone. We need more people. There are 60 of us in the call centers every day. That's not enough. If we have more people, we can operate 24 hours. This center has 3 phone lines now. We could have 4 and save more callers.
To save more people, Reverend Shinohara urges every Japanese to begin by forging closer ties with loved ones.
In Buddhism, there is a word "en." It refers to the ties between you and I, between family members. These days, such ties have weakened. Eventually, it results in an isolated society. It's alienating. I call it a society with no ties, no connections. People have little to do with each other, so it's easy for them to end their lives. If that's why suicide happens, then it is no longer an individual's problem. Everyone has to take responsibility.